Hey people. I am restless today, so I am going to talk to the internet for a bit because this is about the level of socialisation that I'm capable of at the moment. So, there's a couple of things I have opinions on that are kind of rolling around in my head and have been for a while. And I think I might talk about Downton Abbey. Yeah, I'm going to talk about Downton Abbey. Because I can, and this is my Facebook, and I will talk about Downton Abbey if I want to. A small cat has just arrived. Say hi, Fenchurch. Okay. The cat's actually a good thing. So, for those of you who've never watched Downton Abbey, it is a period drama set in the early part of the 20th century. So it, I think, starts in 1915 or something, and carries on till just after the First World War. Can't quite remember. Doesn't matter. Time is kind of immaterial. There's no set time between episodes either, so you can have an episode that directly follows from the previous one, and then the one after that will be a year later. They do put the date in a caption at the beginning of the episode, a bit like they do on Sharp. But fuck if I'm reading that. Thank you, Fenchurch. Downton Abbey is a massive comfort food thing for me. It's comfort food for my brain. It is this sort of twee, very, very luxurious, very comforting period drama that doesn't really ask you to think too much about it. Now, that said, I have thought far too much about Downton Abbey because it is and was a bit of a cultural phenomenon. There was a bus advert the other year which cited the Downton Abbey film as the cinematic event of the year. Like, fuck Avengers Endgame, it was the Downton Abbey movie. It was pointed out to me that believing things that are written on sides of buses is something that's got a lot of people into trouble before. But I actually went to see it at cinema, and it was charming, if lacking in substance. Downton Abbey follows the lives of a well-to-do aristocratic family as they attempt to come to terms with the modernisation of the world and deal with the war. So there are the aristocrats and there are the serving staff from the house and like characters from all over the place. It is deeply uncritical of the upper classes. This is something that Kath and I have talked about quite a lot. The fact that it follows a family that are very specifically more open to reform than a lot of their peers at the time kind of neatly sidesteps the way that it is very uncritical of the upper classes. And maybe that's a problem, maybe it's not. I think it does a reasonable job of showing the friction points between the lifestyle of the upper classes and the world that they find themselves attempting to adapt to. Kiara, I don't know where your NHS millions are. I presume Boris Johnson gave them to a mate of his who said that he could totally deliver Brexit when actually they were a Deliveroo driver. So yeah, the two heads of, I suppose there's three heads of the Crawley family who are the central aristocratic family of this piece. There is Lord Robert, the Earl of Grantham, who is a reasonably sweet man. He is not without his flaws, but he is, and he's probably one of the more traditional characters of the show, but he is an interesting guy. at the point the series starts, he feels very helpless. The heir to his family estate and title has been killed on the Titanic, which is very inconvenient for everyone involved because his daughters can't inherit because women aren't people or something. He feels powerless about this because he wants to provide a future for his daughters and he wants his family name to live on, and all of the ways that he planned to try and make this work just have fallen through because a big fucking ship just sank. He obviously has something of a nihilistic delight about certain things. He very much understands that his time is coming to an end. Not in as much as he's dying, but his relevancy is coming to an end. And to the point where he finds it amusing to hire an Irish revolutionary as his chauffeur and be driven around by him. He does these little things to just make his life slightly more interesting. He has a gay footman. It's addressed later on in the series that they all know Thomas is a bit gay. Lord Robert, at one point later, when someone starts making a big deal of it, says to his valet, we've all known forever that Thomas is like this, and if we reported every instance of boys doing this sort of thing to each other when I was at Eton, we'd have no politicians anymore, or something to that effect. It's very much a, yes, sometimes men just have sex with each other and we don't talk about it, but it's very unfortunate. He's a reasonably open-minded chap for his gender and status in the time period. His wife, Lady Cora Crawley, Countess of Grantham, she is an American who Robert married for her money, but luckily for them they turned out to have a very happy marriage, for the most part. They love each other very much. Cora is one of the few people in the show with an ounce of common sense. Being an American, she has a slightly different view of the aristocracy and how they function in society. I mean, she's still moneyed American, so she is still upper class, and she performs her role as the Countess admirably. But she's an interesting character. And then the other head of the family is Lady Violet Crawley, the Dowager Countess, who is Robert's mother, and she's played by Maggie Smith, doing her best "I'm an old lady and I don't give a fuck" impression. She is delightful. There is a scene at one point where one of the daughters' boyfriends, in as much as they had boyfriends, is she's broken off her engagement with this chap, and there's a shouting match, and Lady Violet comes into the room and goes, "What on earth is going on here?" And the chap says, "I'm very sorry, Lady Crawley. I'm afraid things have come to an end between me and your granddaughter, and you won't be seeing me again." And Violet just sort of goes, "Do you promise?" And just smirks. And that's the kind of shit that she does all the way through the show. She just sasses people constantly, and it's great. Robert and Cora have 3 daughters, Mary, Edith, and Sybil. And they obviously have difficulty trying to raise their children to be, functional adults in a society that doesn't particularly value women for anything other than their ability to breed. Now this changes somewhat as the series goes on, and the war changes how the employment market works in the UK. Lady Sybil Crawley ends up being a nurse. She secretly takes cooking lessons from the house's head cook and signs up to be a nurse and serves in the local hospital, treating soldiers that have come back from the war with various grisly injuries, and she's very good at her job and finds it very rewarding. Lady Edith spends quite a lot of time being completely useless. During the war, the abbey, which is the grand house they all live in, is used as a respite care facility for officers that have recovered enough that they don't need to be in hospital, but they still need care. Edith finds quite a lot of purpose in going around and helping these men, writing their letters, helping them read, and just sort of taking care of things quietly. Yes, Dowager Countess Grantham is just wonderful, and I love her. I kind of want to be her when I grow up. Thank you, Tim. Yes, so Edith does this, and then the war ends, and all the house goes back to normal, and much like her mother, Cora, Edith finds herself lacking purpose in life. She has not had much luck in romance. She is the unfortunate middle child of the family, and with the war mostly taking away quite a lot of the eligible young men she would have been looking to marry at the time, she is very stuck. Various things happen. Edith gets shat on a lot in the show. Those of you who've watched Star Trek, she is the show's O'Brien. She gets constantly shat on for no particular reason. She really doesn't deserve what happens to her. Some of it she brings on herself, some of it really doesn't. Edith eventually, spoilers for Downton Abbey I'm afraid, but Edith eventually ends up making out like a bandit. She inherits a newspaper from a man she was seeing. She ends up being an editor and a reasonably successful journalist, and then later marries a marquess and ends up being higher rank than all the rest of her family and is very happy. It took a long time for her to get her happy ending, but it's the lack of purpose and drive and just showing her as this unlucky foil to Mary, the oldest of the three siblings in the show. So Mary is the oldest child. She is widely conceived to be the prettiest. Perceived, rather. She is witty, she is traditional, she very much understands that her role in life is to get a husband and have a son. She was supposed to marry the guy that died on the Titanic, who was a distant cousin of hers, therefore she would still be able to inherit her mother and father's house titles and fortune, and then eventually ends up marrying the new guy that ends up being the heir, and it's kind of fine. There are a lot of really good characters in this show, and showing how people cope with change and how the upper classes cope with change. A lot of these characters have great arcs. Edith goes through hell and comes out stronger for it. Mary, the eldest daughter, gets... After a fashion, she gets everything she wants, but it never lasts. Until she finally learns to lower her fucking standards. Her arc is about becoming slightly more humble and learning how to work for what she has, which is a powerful thing for a very, very rich, privileged countess to do. Lord Robert comes to accept change. He begrudgingly accepts reform. He slowly comes to accept the role that the younger generation have and the reforms, and the fact that his wife can't give him as much attention because she finds a job. She ends up being a patron of the local hospital, so she runs dinners and things for them. Lord Robert is a great character. I love him. He is flawed, he is bad-tempered, he is conservative, but he loves his children, and he really tries his best. As I said at the beginning, it's very uncritical of the upper classes, but I think Robert being a very, very flawed character is one of the show's redeeming features. There is also a hilarious scene in the final season where he's terribly ill. He has a stomach ulcer or something. And for a very, very gentle period drama show, they are sitting at the dinner table. And again, spoilers for Downton Abbey series 5 or 6, I can't remember. He's sat at the dinner table. He's been complaining of a stomach upset the whole series. So, you know, something, you know, he's dying or whatever. And he proceeds to vomit blood projectilely all over the dinner table when they're throwing a dinner party. It's some proper Aliens bullshit. And it's really funny. Like, do, happy high society dinner. Blah, blood everywhere. One of my favourite moments in the show. There are a couple of characters in the show that do not have an arc. And John Bates, who starts as Lord Robert's valet, is one of them. John Bates is a character who he served in the, I think it's the Boer War with Lord Robert. He was his Batman, which is not a masked superhero, it's basically an officer's manservant. And then when the war ends, he is invited by Robert to come and be his valet at Downton Abbey. He has a war injury, so he walks with a cane and has a bit of a limp. And at the very beginning, the staff of the household are upset because the fact that he is mildly disabled means that he can't muck in and help with certain tasks, and a big deal is made out of this. Unfortunately, Bates's injury only turns up when the writers remember it's there, and he is used very much as, it just kind of goes away when it's inconvenient for the story, which a little problematic. So there he is. He falls in love with one of the housemaids, later Lady Mary's lady's maid, whose name is Anna. Turns out John Bates is actually married, but he's separated from his wife Vera for various reasons. Mainly she's a bitch and a criminal. He did some crime for her, or she did crime and he took the fall for it, so he's been in prison, and it's very dramatic. Bates is the personification of what happens when someone is raised in this very, very toxic masculinity, stiff upper lip environment and is never able to grow. He's given so many opportunities to grow as a person, and they just don't happen. He feels it's his duty and responsibility to shoulder the problems of everybody and never ask for help. He doesn't show his emotions. He doesn't talk about his problems. He attempts to stoic out every single thing that happens. The only reason that he is eventually able to have his happy ending with Anna is because Anna, for some fucking reason, is in love with this man, and she does not stop trying to get through to him, and he doesn't even let her, she does it behind his back, and he's upset with her about it, and then she ends up fixing his life, and you'd think that that would be the lesson for this man to learn, that maybe talking to the woman I love about these things, maybe talking to people, maybe being honest, maybe having a conversation like an adult would stop me having these problems. But he keeps doing it. After that first time, he ends up in prison for a while because they think he's killed his wife. Turns out he hasn't. Kind of wish he had. It would have made him more interesting. So he ends up in prison. Later on, his wife is sexually assaulted at a party that the house is throwing. She refuses to tell him about it for months because she is afraid that he will find out who did it and go and murder him. She believes that her husband, the man she loves, will straight up murder this man who has assaulted her. Which isn't great in the trust stakes. For some reason, she does not think that he will respect her wishes to do it, and she's probably right. I don't know why she's still with him. She could do so much better. Anna, incidentally, is one of those characters where you're never quite sure if she's supposed to be 14 or 40. Because she's very naive, but also very grown up and independent in some ways. While Bates is in prison, his dear wife Anna becomes the most interesting that she is in the entire thing. Her status as a married woman, even to a criminal, affords her a level of independence and respect that she didn't have before, within the household, if not outside of it. And she becomes actually interesting. She laughs, she jokes, her friendship with Lady Mary develops. And as soon as he gets out of prison, she becomes boring again. And doesn't grow. And she is just devoted to this man who she actually believes is capable of murder. And I don't know what this is supposed to teach us about relationships or anything. Bates continues to take other people's problems himself. Obviously, he eventually finds out that his wife has been assaulted, and there's a big drama about it, and he does his best to try and make her feel better on an emotional support level. He's not very good at it, but he tries, and I don't know, she knew what she was marrying, I guess. But he makes it about him. She keeps this very, very painful secret to herself because she knows he will make it about him and how he feels. He makes it about him. He starts doing things and acting on their behalf, not taking into account anything that she says, anything she might be feeling. He deals with it the way he thinks. He deals with it the way he thinks it should be dealt with, rather than listening to the victim in this, who should have the most say. And it is deeply frustrating for this character, who I quite liked when he first started. And by the end, he is a caricature of British stoicism in the worst and most toxic ways, and Anna should have dumped his ass, or left him to rot in prison, because it's just fucking ridiculous. I hate him. He's a condescending asshole. There are like 2 good character moments that he has, and one is when he arranges it so an ex-colleague of theirs can get some money to get out of some dire financial distress he was in. And the other one is when he manages to stop the gay manservant from being fired by doing a little bit of clever manipulation. Those are 2 character moments he has where he is actually likeable. The rest of it, he's just this miserable sod who never learns that talking to people about what's going on with you tends to solve things. Whereas, this is in contrast to another character who comes to the house with a criminal record, and I cannot remember her name, but she starts as Lady Cora's lady's maid. She's played by one of the actors who was in Teachers. Fuck, I can't remember her name. Anyway, it's later discovered that she has a criminal record, and one of the other staff finds out about it. One of her friends finds out that one of the staff is blackmailing her about it. Somebody is phoning me from work. How can I pause this? Fuck. Okay, guess you're just gonna have to hear me on the work call. Hey Sean, you alright? Awesome. Okay, this is going to go on for a few minutes. I'm going to have to restart this in a sec. More Downton Abbey ranting to come.